Lotte takes a new leap beyond its boundaries. Our change will lead to better lives for all. New Lotte, the power of a better world. New today, better tomorrow. Lotte.
Coming up on Arirang News. The leaders of the group of 7 countries are arriving in Hiroshima, Japan, ahead of the annual G7 summit, which officially kicks off on Friday. President Yoon also travels to Hiroshima for expanded sessions and possibly a trilateral with Japan and the U.S. on the sidelines. President Yoon emphasizes the spirit of the May 18 Gwangju democratization movement, calling it the key to unity. This as the conservative president visits the liberal stronghold of Gwangju in the south of the country for a second year in a row. We had a rare access to South Korean Navy drills, including the nation's top warships, from the Aegis-class destroyer Sejong the Great to the 3,000-ton class Dosan Ahn Changho submarine, demonstrating combat readiness against North Korea's threats. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We begin with the annual G7 summit, which officially kicks off tomorrow. The leaders of the group of 7 countries are arriving in Hiroshima, Japan, ahead of their discussions on global relations and the world economy. President Yoon also travels to Hiroshima, not only to share his thoughts on a variety of issues, but also possibly for a trilateral with Japan and the U.S. on the sidelines. Shin Se-byuk walks us through the timeline of Yoon's trip.
South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol will fly over to Hiroshima on Friday for the G7 summit. He will be the 4th South Korean leader to participate in the multilateral event. The 3-day summit kicks off Friday with opening events and discussions for the G7 countries, the United States, Japan, Germany, the United Kingdom, France, Canada, and Italy. The total of 9 sessions will start on Friday with a discussion about the global economy over a working lunch, and in the afternoon, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky joining virtually. Indo-Pacific-related issues, most likely centered around Chinese issues, along with nuclear disarmament, are also expected over a working dinner. On Saturday, economic security talks in the morning will be followed by expanded sessions with 8 invited countries, including South Korea, India, and Australia. The talks will cover 2 themes: food, public health, development, and gender, and climate change and energy security, where Yoon is to share his views on. On the final day, an event for invited leaders and a session on peace, stability, and prosperity will precede the closing ceremony. President Yoon will be returning to Seoul on Sunday. Meanwhile, during the 3-day summit, Yoon is set to have one-on-one meetings with 6 government leaders. Those include talks with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida on Sunday. The 2 leaders are also scheduled to make a joint visit to a monument honoring Korean victims of the 1945 atomic bomb that wrecked Hiroshima. The highly anticipated trilateral summit between Yoon, Kishida, and U.S. President Joe Biden has not been announced yet. However, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan on Wednesday said the 3 leaders are eager to meet and that it's a matter of scheduling, while mentioning Biden has a packed schedule. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida says that the U.S. Japan alliance serves as the foundation for peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region. This came on Thursday during a bilateral summit between the leaders of the U.S. and Japan. U.S. President Joe Biden had arrived in Japan on the eve of the G7 summit in Hiroshima. During the meeting, the 2 leaders emphasized the importance of U.S.-Japan relations amid China's growing military and economic presence, as well as the ongoing war in Ukraine. During this year's G7 summit, which will kick off on Friday, the leaders from some of the world's largest economies, including South Korea, will discuss various issues, including the war in Ukraine and climate change. President Yoon emphasizes the spirit of the May 18 Gwangju pro-democracy movement, calling it the key to unity. This as the conservative president visited the liberal stronghold of Gwangju in the south of the country for a second year in a row, singing together a symbolic song dedicated to those who perished during the movement more than 40 years ago. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
The song, Marching for Our Beloved, resonates in South Korea's southwestern city of Gwangju on Thursday, with politicians across the spectrum singing along. This is to commemorate 43 years since the May 18 Gwangju democratization movement and the brutal crackdown on it by the military, resulting in a tragic loss of life. Officially, more than 150 died, but many believe the real number is higher. President Yoon, as he stood in front of the victims' graves at the May 18 National Cemetery, highlighted what he called the May spirit, which stems from the city's sacrifice and dedication to establishing democracy, reflected the nation's constitution. And he said it must be carried on.
그리고 5월의 정신은 우리에게 자유민주주의를 지키기 위한 실천을 명령하고 있습니다. 우리가 5월의 정신을 잊지 않고 계승한다면 우리는 자유와 민주주의를 위협하는 모든 세력과 도전에 당당히 맞서 싸워야 하고 그런 실천적 용기를 가져야 합니다.
This year's ceremony focused on the mothers who lost family members to the military violence, and President Yoon laid a wreath with 10 of them and offered them words of consolation. Adding to this history, he pledged to develop the area surrounding Gwangju City, the Jeollado provinces also known as Honam. He said the May spirit will be, quote, completed when the region achieves economic development centered on freedom, creativity, and innovation.
저는 광주와 호남이 자유와 혁신을 바탕으로 AI와 첨단 과학기술의 고도화를 이루어내고 이러한 성취를 미래 세대에게 계승시킬 수 있도록 대통령으로서 제대로 뒷받침하겠습니다.
This message is more than words. The Honam region is traditionally a stronghold for the country's Liberal Party, the Democratic Party of Korea, and despite being a conservative leader, this is the second year in a row President Yoon has attended this event. Former conservative presidents Lee Myung-bak and Park Geun-hye only took part in their first year. According to the top office, President Yoon also ordered Veteran Affairs Minister Park Min-sik to expand the cemetery's rest area so family members could utilize the space better. Also in attendance was the Speaker of National Assembly Kim Jin-pyo along with the leaders of South Korea's major parties. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Earlier reports of North Korea testing nuclear-capable underwater drones have sparked security concerns. With that in mind, naval authorities here recently offered their press corps the rare opportunity to witness firsthand their maritime might, Sejong the Great destroyer and the Dosan Ahn Changho submarine. Our correspondent Kim Hyun-sung was on board and tells us why they're key to South Korea's defense readiness.
Just off the coast of Busan sails South Korea's Sejong the Great destroyer. The Aegis-class destroyer's crew are training, honing their ability to conduct anti-ballistic and anti-submarine activities. The ship's primary mission: to create a formidable shield against any potential threats from North Korea, especially its recently revealed submarine-launched ballistic missiles. In a rare opportunity, a group of defense reporters were allowed to observe the training. This Aegis-class destroyer, christened Sejong the Great, is considered one of Asia's most formidable warships. And what you see behind me is the ultimate powerhouse behind this vessel, the ship's vertical launching systems. This ship has 128 of them, known to have the most out of any other warship in the world. Another impressive feature of this ship is its state-of-the-art radar, capable of detecting any threats as far as 1,000 kilometers away. This cutting-edge feature also allows it to identify up to 1,000 targets all at once. In the skies above are the P-3 patrol plane and the Lynx helicopter, here to back up Sejong the Great on its mission. They're adding extra surveillance by dropping in sonar systems into the water to search for enemies. After setting up a mock target, the ship practices firing a vertically launched anti-submarine dummy missile underwater.
Sejong the Great maintains the highest level of combat readiness through intensive training that simulates real combat, preparing for various threats from the enemy.
At the port city of Jinhae, the South Korean Navy recently unveiled another formidable weapon, the 3,000-ton class submarine, the Dosan Ahn Changho. It was developed using South Korea's own technology, with the country joining an exclusive club of 8 nations with homegrown 3,000-ton class submarines. This powerhouse has upgraded stealth features, comes loaded with a versatile armament of torpedoes, sea mines, and guided missiles, and is powered through a high-tech fuel cell. The South Korean Navy relentlessly trains so it can effectively deploy these cutting-edge vessels to safeguard the future of South Korea's seas and skies. Kim, Arirang News.
A group of North Koreans, including children, reportedly crossed the de facto inter-Korean sea border on a fishing boat earlier this month. According to relevant sources on Thursday, military authorities found the ship approaching the northern limit line on the night of May 6th and quickly deployed troops to intercept it. Reports say that the North Koreans expressed their intention to defect to South Korea. They're currently undergoing questioning by government agencies, including the National Intelligence Service at a military base in the Seoul metropolitan area. In recent years, the number of North Korean defectors dropped due to strict border controls against the spread of COVID-19. Last year, there were 67 reported defectors. South Korea is now less than a week away from the third launch of its homegrown space rocket, Nuri. The first flight was a partial success, reaching its target altitude, but failing to put a dummy satellite into orbit. The second flight was a success. This time, Nuri takes on its first ever mission with real satellites on board. Our Lee Kyung-eun has more on the significance of the third launch.
The third launch of the Nuri rocket will use the same rocket used in the first and second launches. The country's first ever homegrown spacecraft, Nuri, meaning world in Korean, is a 3-stage rocket developed to put satellites into low orbit. The first and second stages are the boosters that help the rocket blast through the Earth's atmosphere. The third stage contains satellites, and it will release them at the target altitude. And that is where we find the significance of this third launch. Previously, Nuri was topped with dummy satellites or a verification satellite, all meant to test the rocket's capabilities. But this time, it will be carrying 8 satellites on actual scientific missions. That's why the third launch is dubbed the Nuri's landmark, first mission with first passengers on board. Next generation satellite, the second, is the main satellite among the 8. It operates on solar energy and needs a particular orbit to get the energy it needs. And the entire launch process is tailored for its transportation. First, the blast-off time. It is set for 6:24 p.m., unlike 4 p.m. in the previous launches. That's precisely calculated in order to put the main satellite into that orbit. This is why it is not an option to change the launch time like in the first launch. Any next attempt will have to come on the new date at the same time. Next, the target altitude. It is set at 550 kilometers, just high enough for the satellite to conduct its mission, unlike 700 kilometers, set for previous capacity test flights. This time, Nuri is also offering a better service. It's directly taking the passengers, the satellites, to their destinations. The main satellite will be separated first, then the rest every 20 seconds. All this will take 923 seconds. That's a lot shorter than the 2 weeks it took during the previous launch when the verification satellite carried the other satellites and released them. Lastly, this will mark a critical first step for South Korea's private-led space endeavors, with Hana Aerospace, which will be in charge of future launches of Nuri, on site for technology transfer. 이경은, 아리랑 뉴스.
While the U.S. planned to attend the G7 summit in Hiroshima this weekend, Chinese leader Xi Jinping is also hosting a two-day summit with leaders of 5 Central Asian countries. Talks are expected to deepen their economic and political ties, likely touching upon China's Belt and Road Initiative. Lee Si-hoo reports.
China's Xi Jinping and the presidents of 5 Central Asian countries, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan, are seeking to deepen ties at the two-day China-Central Asia Summit beginning on Thursday. Hosted by Xi Jinping in China's western historic city of Xian, from where the Silk Road's eastern end began, the summit is the first in-person group huddle of its kind. The meeting overlaps with a Group of 7 meeting in Hiroshima, Japan from May 19th to the 21st, where the main talking points are expected to include efforts to counter China's threat to global supply chains and economic security. At the same time, President Xi is expected to push for stronger economic and political relationships with 5 strategically important former Soviet states. Now the summit comes as China's ally Russia's influence wanes across the former Soviet states, and Russia continues to channel what remaining resources it has into the war in Ukraine. According to China's foreign ministry, President Xi will deliver a, quote, important speech on Friday at the meeting of 6 leaders. An important political document will also be signed. Then there will be talks between China and the Central Asian leaders, followed by a banquet joined by the first ladies. An official from China's foreign ministry said that there will be some 20 bilateral and multilateral diplomatic events taking place during the two-day summit. Many agreements are expected to be made in areas such as economy and trade. Meanwhile, discussion is also expected on cooperation efforts in China's $1 trillion Belt and Road Initiative, a strategy that seeks to connect Asia with Africa and Europe via land and maritime networks. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
Turning to the situation in Ukraine, the country's capital city, Kyiv, was on Thursday morning attacked from the air by Russia for the 9th time this month. The Kyiv city government said the strikes were carried out by strategic bombers from the Caspian region, and later Russia deployed reconnaissance craft. But according to the Kyiv military administration, preliminary information indicates all enemy targets were destroyed. Meanwhile, on the same day, 1 person was killed and 2 more were injured in a Russian missile strike on the Ukrainian Black Sea port city of Odessa. There were also blasts reported in the central regions of Vinnytsia, Khmelnytsky, and Zhytomyr. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has asked global chip makers to invest more in Japan following the country's efforts to boost its chip sector. His remarks came on Thursday at Kishida's official residence in Tokyo during a meeting with 7 leaders of global semiconductor firms, including Samsung Electronics, TSMC, Intel, and Micron. According to Kyodo News, Kishida pledged that the Japanese government will work on further expanding direct investment in Japan and support its chip industry. The same day, American chipmaker Micron announced that it'll invest $3.6 billion over the next few years to produce advanced memory chips at its plant in Hiroshima under the support of the Japanese government. The number of international flights in and out of South Korean airports has increased 642% over the past year. The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport said Thursday that there were 407 flights per week in April last year. In April this year, there were 3,021. Last month's figure is 65% of the average from 2019 before the start of COVID-19 pandemic. During the same period, the number of airport workers, such as pilots and flight attendants, has recovered to 89% compared to December 2019. The ministry said it plans to increase the number of international flights to pre-pandemic levels of about 4,000 flights by September. South Korea has been struggling with an oversupply of rice due to a fall in demand as people's dietary habits become more westernized in Korea. And on top of this, President Yoon recently rejects the revision to the Grain Management Act, which requires the government to buy surplus rice. Our Lee Soo-jin reports on a new type of rice flour called karumi, emerging as a potential solution to the problem.
South Korea has come up with a new type of rice flour. It's called karumi, and it could be the answer to the nation's excess rice issue. The average amount of rice consumed per person in the country last year fell to a record low of 56.7 kilograms, around half of what was consumed 30 years ago. To address this, the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs is planning to promote the usage of karumi, or rice flour, the world's first that doesn't require water.
Normally, rice needs to be soaked in water overnight so it can be ground into fine powder. This not only requires a large amount of water, but nutrients may also be lost.
This type of rice flour, however, produced from a mutant variety of rice developed by the Rural Development Administration, has a starch structure similar to that of wheat, allowing it to be dry milled.
If rice is dry milled, it can save production costs and the quality of the starch remains intact. So when the bread is made with this flour, it remains gluten-free and chewy.
This bakery, located in Sejong, is one of the 9 in the nation that uses more than 1 ton of karumi. The baker takes the rice flour and whisks it into the mixer along with the same ingredients that are added when baking with wheat. The ratio of egg whites to yolk for cake rolls, however, is 50-50, which requires more heating. The dough is then placed in the oven without the addition of gluten. The wide variety of bread made using karumi has been received well by customers.
People say that karumi bread is easier to digest and that it's chewy. It also has a soft texture.
There are still several barriers to overcome before karumi can be commercialized. Its price, in particular. The head baker pays nearly $70 for one 20-kilogram bag. As of December 2022, a 20-kilogram bag of regular rice costs just under half that. The Agricultural Ministry, however, says that it has begun mass production of karumi, which will ultimately lower prices. The government is thus hopeful that this innovative rice flour may soon not only become widespread domestically, but become a major export item. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News, Sejong.
Old-fashioned Korean traditional snacks are making a return, with snacks like yakgwa, also called honey cookies, and rice cake-based sweets becoming very popular among the younger generations. Yoon has the story.
White steam from freshly made rice cake and its savory scent fills the kitchen. A variety of rice cakes that used to be called grandma and grandpa snacks are now becoming popular among younger people.
These snacks used to be in high demand among the elderly, so we would package them in bulk. But now we have individual packaging to meet the recent jump in demand from single-person households and younger people.
Maintaining the stickiness of the rice cake is essential, which has been made possible by quick freezing technology. In South Korea has a patented special quick freezing method tailored for starchy rice cake-based snacks. Delivered and sold in its frozen state, both freshness and taste and texture are kept until consumption. Barley used to symbolize poverty, food for the poor. But now, from snacks made from barley to it being mixed to produce flavored decaffeinated coffee, barley-based beverages are targeting the so-called MZ generation.
There was high demand from people unable to sleep after drinking coffee in the afternoon. But now we have growing demand from test prep students and office workers.
These old-fashioned snacks and drinks could have become only a memory of generations past. But modern food technology has given these traditional snacks a makeover to meet the more modern demand.
We are looking for companies that produce agriculturally based products that target consumers from the MZ generation.
No longer snacks just for grandma and grandpa. A new era is opening in the snack industry for the return of traditional snacks with a modern touch in the production process as well as the packaging. 이은진, 아리랑 뉴스.
Showers are coming and going across the nation tonight. A low-pressure system will keep developing overnight, which will produce showers until the morning. Overall conditions across South Korea will vary depending on the region. Western regions, including the capital, will be very warm at 28 degrees. The east of the country is currently under the influence of cold easterly winds, and much cooler spells are in store. Daegwallyeong and Gangwon-do province will be breezy at 15 degrees. Southern parts of the country will see heavier showers. Along with gusty offshore winds, Jeju Island will see 10 to 50 millimeters. The south coast will see 5 to 30. Other inland regions will see spotty showers of 5 millimeters. Tomorrow, Seoul, Daegu, and Gwangju will all be starting off at 16 degrees. And showers will taper off by the daytime. As for the readings, Seoul reaching 28, Dosan and Gwangju 26, Gwangju will be topping out at 22 degrees. And temperatures will be on a cooling trend until this Sunday. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all for this Thursday night newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with the latest news tomorrow. Have a good night.
Ireland, like Korea, is a very outward-facing country. Our peoples are curious about the world.